All right. Miss Ayla Miller is here to speak with us this morning about developing and utilizing a sound program of activities for your FFA chapter.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Ayla Miller. I teach at West Perry School District. This is my 10th year at West Perry, and I actually started at West Perry right out of college. So this is my 10th year teaching in total as well. So just before we get started, I would like everybody to introduce themselves, where you teach, and if you want to tell us what your either your comfort level with POAs are, or maybe why you're here today and something you hope to take away from this webinar once we're done, that would be great. And then we'll get started. So I'll just kind of call your name as I see on the screen. So go ahead, Lindsay.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Wilcox. I teach at Blackhawk High School, and we have started POAs but have not ever finished one. So I'm just looking forward to kind of hearing some best practices and what we can do to do that better.
All right, Sarah Beth.
Hi. I'm Sarah Beth Aldifer. I teach at Athens High School, and to be honest, our POA is just a timeline of events. It's not an actual POA. So I'm excited to get some tips and hints on how to make it more legitimate.
Carol? I didn't want to leave you out.
There I am. I'm Carol Fay. I'm the SAE specialist. I taught at Penn Manor for 30 years, retired, and now I'm traveling around the state, helping everybody with whatever you need help with.
Kelsey? All right, you must not be there. Jennifer?
Hi, Jenny Balmer, Northern Lebanon High School. We have a POA, but I want to try to get it more on the date, so it's more.
Gretchen?
Always willing to learn and more about a program of activities and how to little tricks and trades of the field. So.
All right, thank you. Diane? Diane Miller? Sorry, there's two of you. All right, how about Diana?
Hello, I'm having trouble with my Wi-Fi. Diana Jarima, Bermudian Springs. We have used different program of activities over the years, starting off with a timeline from Excel to going to more of a complete booklet, but I'd like to get the kids to do more on AET. We did start 1 year and then gave them the responsibilities, but they never finished it. So just looking to get more information of maybe how to implement it a little bit better.
Okay, thank you. And Tiff?
I unmuted.
Yep.
Tiffany Hoy from Tyrone Area High School. We've been using POA for about 7 years now. We have found that Google Docs works best for us. All of our committees meet during class time. Kids ask us for certain days just because we have problems with transportation and some other things in our school district. But it drives our program. We could actually probably do away with the officers and just drive with committees in some instances. So we're pretty comfortable with it, but I'm just looking for some more ideas and trips and tips and so forth and so on.
Thank you. Diane Miller?
Good morning. I'm at Oxford High School. As far as the POA goes, again, I'm kind of along with Sarah Beth, where we kind of get kids together and we see something coming up on the calendar. Somebody asks us to do something. We have a few key things that we've done every year for the last 3 years or so, but there's really no reason to it. So I'd like to have something set up ahead of time in such a way that helps the kids to be able to keep their records, so that it, I guess, becomes part of their curriculum vitae, so to say.
All right, thank you, everyone. So we're definitely going to address some of those things that you guys talked about there. But it's nice to know where everybody is before we get started. I'm going to share with you kind of the system that I've been using. So we've done a POA all 10 years I've been here. It's definitely transformed and it's looked different though throughout those 10 years. And we are to a point that our officers are taking ownership of those events. And I'm happy to share with you guys today the system I use to get our officers to work together like that. So that's what I'm going to do. By all means, as we go, if you guys have questions or you just want to discuss something, stop me. Definitely the more feedback we get from you guys, the more beneficial I think this will be for you guys taking this home and implementing it in your chapters. So I am going to share my screen with you. I have a second monitor, so if you see me like looking to this side, it's because I'm looking at the Zoom versus my first monitor. And I tried to change it around and I just couldn't get it that I wasn't looking the wrong way. All right. All right, so at this point, I think you guys see my screen. Can somebody confirm that for me? All right,
Yep,
so the first thing I would like you guys to do, and I'm not gonna read these questions out loud to you, but just read these questions. Well, I guess I better because Tiff's on the phone. Sorry, Tiff. I want you to just answer these questions with a yes or no. And then if you can in the chat bar, just put total yeses and total nos for these questions. So for example, if you had 2 yeses and 2 nos, you can put 2Y, 2N in the chat bar, just so we see where everybody is. So question number 1, have you ever been in a situation where classroom instruction gets pushed to the bottom of your list because of the demands of FFA events? Question 2, as an advisor, do you find yourself in situations where an FFA event does not go as you would like due to lack of time for planning? Question 3, as an advisor, do you constantly find yourself telling students what tasks to complete in order for an FFA event to be a success? And question 4, do you often find yourself finishing tasks that FFA members should be completing if it's a student-run organization? So if you could just put your total yes, no's in the chat bar, that would be great. So John, I'm struggling. How do I get back to seeing my Zoom? Like I can't actually see the chat bar right now.
If you click chat, it should pop it up in front of your screen.
Right, so all I see right now is like a small thumbnail of it though.
There should be.
Oh, I see it now.
Yeah, you should be able to expand it or maximize it a little bit.
Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of yeses for these questions, and I had set them up like that I was thinking that people that wanted to learn more about POA and teachers who wanted to learn about how to implement POAs more probably are answering a lot of yeses to these questions. So the goal would be at the end of this webinar, I hope you guys have at least one tool or trick that you guys can take back to you that next time if you were presented with these same 4 questions, you're not going to move to the no column on all of them right away, but maybe 1 or 2 of them you're able to start saying no to, that kids are starting to do a little more of that work. That would be the goal, that you know, if you're implementing a POA, you're not going to always be able to say no to these questions, but a lot more often you'll be able to say no to these questions. So that's great. Oh, shoot. All right, the next questions then, same deal, just kind of keep track and do how many yeses, how many nos. Is POA a word in your officer's vocabulary, is question 1. Do students shop for supplies needed for FFA events, is number 2. Number 3, do students complete tasks necessary to conduct FFA events without you reminding them? And number 4, do you ever find yourself questioning if activities are planned and supplies are secured and you find out that the answer is really yes, even though you did not plan or purchase them? All right, we're seeing some mixed yes and no's on these ones. This one as well, hopefully, if you're utilizing a POA, the answer is yes, but in all honesty, it's not always going to be. You're going to have some no's. But again, at the end of this workshop, I would hope that if you're implementing POAs and stuff, you're able to start saying yes to some of those questions as well. So, all right, so today, my goals and objectives are to teach or show you guys how to utilize the program of activity tools that are already available to us in the AET and how to execute those activities throughout the year with your FFA officers, and then discuss the tips I use to get my student leaders or my officers to buy into the events that we are planning, and then obviously to open it up for discussion from you guys, because I'm sure you guys have great strategies as well that you can share with the group. So the tools that I'm going to talk about today specifically is an officer retreat or an officer training, committees, officer duties binder. That's something I totally created, but it works really well for us, so I wanted to share that with you guys. AET, and then also the national chapter application. This webinar, there was one in June about specifically national chapter applications, but in all honesty, if you're putting together a POA, you'll find that putting together a national chapter application is a pretty simple process once you go through the process of creating your POA. So I want to share that with you guys too before the end. So to start with the officer retreat and officer training, I'm sure everybody has some type of officer retreat or training that they do with their students. For us, we go on a 3-day camping trip, and this is when we introduce the idea of POAs to our officers. And the first thing that we do, and I think this is really important for buy-in from the students, is I call it stoplight activities. And we give the students a red, a yellow, and a green note card. And on that note card, what we'll do, we'll start with what some of you referred to as kind of a list of your events. And I'm going to show you our list. This was from last year. And to be honest with you guys, probably my first 3 years, this document that you're going to see right now, this is what we called a POA. So just like some of you had mentioned, you have more of a list of events and that's what you call your POA. That's the same boat we were in probably my first 3 years of teaching. And then we transitioned and started doing things a little differently. And we have a more extensive POA now, of course. But if you have a list, that's really a starting ground for you. So what we would do, we would take this list, and these are the events that we had done last year, okay? So we take those lists that we had done last year, and we go through them and say, okay, new member picnic. And what the students will do, usually we have a group of anywhere from 7 to 9 officers. If they think, yes, we definitely need to do this event next year, they'll hold up their green card. If they say, I don't really know what this is, so we might come to Kyle, and that list of activities just says Kyle. So the students, especially if they're new officers or they haven't done that event in the past, they don't know what Kyle is. So maybe they hold up their yellow card because they need to know more information about that event. And then finally, if they don't think that our chapter should be doing that event, they hold up the red card. And a lot of you had shared that something that you struggle to implement POAs is time. And time is something as an ag teacher, if we just always keep throwing green cards at all these events, we run out of time really fast. So it's important to teach the kids that as well. We can't do every event every year. It isn't always a worthwhile experience for our chapter. And that's sometimes those hard discussions that you have when the kids throw those red cards. And if they don't see the worth in having it, it's really their chapter, and that's worth discussing. Now there's some things, for example, they don't like selling fruit. If they throw a red card for fruit, well, you can't do much if you don't have a fruit sale and things like that. But I found that just this one simple activity, it does 2 things. It creates buy-in because it allows the kids to say, we wanted to have this activity. We wanted to pursue this activity. And the second thing that it does, it lets them see that whole list of activities that your chapter plans. So we plan out at our officer retreat what activities we're going to do for that year before we go any further. So that's kind of the step 1 of how I approach POAs, is setting that list up with the students for that complete school year. Obviously, knowing it's a working document, it can change all of that. but we set that up with the students. And this is the activity that I use to do that. And it's kind of nice because they don't have to talk. They don't have the pressure of saying, no, I don't like this activity. All they do is throw their card, and then we talk about, we help them lead the discussion of, if they need more information, if an officer can fill them in and tell them about that event, and then they can make up their mind and things like that. So is there any questions about that I can answer? It's really pretty straightforward. So that's the first step that we do. Really having technology issues here. The next thing that we do then is we assign a committee and then a quality standard to each event. So some of you who have really dove into POAs already and have what you consider a pretty good working POA, you've probably seen in the national chapter handbook. And this is, the national chapter really recognizes chapters who have outstanding POAs. So even if you don't want to complete a national chapter application, I'd recommend taking a look at this handbook to create yourself a framework for your POA. So the way that national FFA says that a good POA should be set up is it's outlined in here. Okay, so national FFA breaks POAs into 3 sections. And those 3 sections are activities that they consider in the growing leaders, activities they consider in the building communities, and activities they consider in the strengthening agriculture. So in each of those sections, you'll find there's 5 quality standards. So then you'll look at your event, and this gives a description here about what that particular type of activity might look like, and then you apply those quality standards. So those of you who've done the national chapter application in the past, you know that national FFA requires chapters to have at least 1 activity in each of those quality standards. So that would be a total of 15. Sometimes you'll look at it and an activity will fit into more than 1, just depending on how you read those descriptions. So if you're struggling, if you're saying, we don't really have an activity that fits into that citizenship, it'd be great, if students can think of an activity that you could implement or create to do that. But sometimes they can be used in multiple places. That makes it a little easier to do that. So national FFA says a POA, that's what it should look like. Those 3 sections, and then those quality standards then applied to that. So in our chapter with committees, we have those 3 committees. So strengthening agriculture, building communities, and growing leaders. Okay, and our committees, we meet, and this is another example where everybody's schools are different. So I'm hoping you guys will chime in here and kind of tell the group how you do it, because my situation is going to be different than yours, and you might get a better idea from somebody else than mine. So the way our school does it, we have what we call a resource period that meets in the middle of the school day. And that's when we have our club meetings. So our students do an ACBC schedule. So activity, committee, business, committee. So we have a committee meeting every other meeting essentially. And that's when our committees meet. We really encourage our officers, because those committees can get very big since you only have 3 of them. Sometimes we'll have committees with 20 kids in them. We really try to teach our officers to break their students into smaller subsections and say, okay, you're going to go work on the Kyle activity today, you're going to work on the new member picnic today, and try to break those students up so they become more effective in those committees. Committees is something we do spend a lot of time in our officer retreat trying to teach our students how to work in a committee. And what John and I will sometimes do is we have an event that we know we're ready to start planning with the group, and him and I will kind of role play the committee chair and then the committee liaison. So our committee liaisons are our officers, and our committee chairs then are elected by the general membership. And we'll try to role play those roles so the students can see how the liaison and the chair should be interacting with the rest of the committee members to encourage them and get your membership out there and starting to work. So it's definitely, in my situation, it's helpful that we have dedicated committee meeting days that occurs during the school day. I know not everybody is fortunate enough to have that though. So that's how we work our committees. And that's our next step, is we say, okay, the new member picnic is going to be handled by the, growing leaders committee, and that, so that, each committee knows from the beginning of the year what activities they're going to be responsible for planning. So I'm just curious if anybody else has good working committees and you want to share how you do that. I'd welcome that at this time. I know, Tiff, you had said specifically about your committees and how well they work. So if you want to share that with the group, that'd be great.
Yeah, about 5 or 6 years ago, we decided we have something called Management Monday. And then sometimes Fridays, depending on the school week, we will have committee meetings. And basically, we take all the quality standards and we just don't present it to our officers. Right in the beginning of the year, we present it to every single ag class. And students are openly allowed to come up with ideas and suggestions. And then from there, it gets narrowed down. And based on the activity and maybe how it relates to that particular ag class, or if a student comes to me and says, hey, we want to do this, then it will go to ag class to 5 members, 7 members per committee. And it's a great way for us to teach writing SMART goals for the entire chapter. It also is one of the things I always find out is my new members are always like, oh, well, we're going to do all this planning, but we're really not going to do this. And so when they find out, and other kids are like, no, what you plan, and if you plan it out and you bring it to the chapter and you get it all done, yeah, as long as it's legal, I'm going to let them do it. And so I think that has been a big shift in the group, is that they think about it. Our officers are liaisons. They are not chairs. Every once in a while, they'll chair a committee, but we have the membership. They vote for their secretary, or they appoint their secretary and their chair or co-chairs. And then every time they meet, they have to run a Google report and put their information in there, along with their plans, their SMART goals, their purpose, and then their outcomes and reflections. So that's been real successful. That took us about 5 years ago. We went to that. We tried it different ways. And since then, they actually now come into school within the first week saying, when are we starting committees? And I'm always blown away because my mind isn't at that point. So this year, we're actually going to start off. We come back for 4 days right in the beginning of the year. We're just going to start off right then and there and let the kids start planning. I mean, there's activities we always do because we have to, like fundraisers. But those don't really fall in the quality standards. They don't have a quality standard set with them. But we already have, I have students that have been texting me and emailing me saying, hey, I have this great idea. Can we do this? Or a spinoff comes from a committee activity from the previous year. I have seniors that graduated and are already saying, hey, what's going on with this? I just want to make sure it gets handled for next year. So that's kind of how we do it. And we meet once a month. We have a 20-minute advisory period every day, and some committees come and meet then. But most of the time, the committees will ask. Right in the beginning of the year, we set a specific Monday. After that, it starts getting that committees will approach me and say, do you mind if we meet during this class time, as long as we get this accomplished or we get our other work done? And I never have a problem with that. So that's how we kind of work it.
All right, thanks, Tiff. And that's something I work with John Hines as well, and him and I were planning our officer retreat today, actually. And that was a comment that I had said to him. I said, you know, we're really good at presenting the information to our chapter officers. Now we need to move it to the membership. And that's kind of our goal for this year. And Diana has a question. Do you share these ideas from National Chapter Handbook with your officers, or do you allow them to create / brainstorm ideas and then fit into the committee? We create the list of events that we want to that they want to do, and then we go to the handbook to see how they fit into those quality standards. Like Tiff said, not every event you come up with has a perfect quality standard, and it doesn't always fit into a quality standard. We will assign it the one that we think fits most closely, though, is how we handle that. So does anybody else have any committee success stories or struggles you have with committees that you're looking for some feedback of how to help make that better? All right, and then Sarah Beth asked a question. How often do our committees meet? So our ACBC schedule is, we have a club meeting every 6 school days because we have an A. Okay, so the A stands for activity, C is committee, and B is business. But then we also have an A through whatever 6-day schedule is for our school. Like today will be A day, B day, C day, etc. Does that make sense? So we meet every 6 days for our club. All right, so anything else? Is there any questions? If you've never seen that national chapter, quality standards and such, is there any questions about those?
I have a question about committees. This is for like anybody. How do you have your students choose what committee to be a part of? Like, how does it not just become, I'm going to go with where my friends are?
So I'll start and then I'll let anybody else answer who wants to. So we had that problem several years ago where like we would say, okay, we're going to break into committees today, and kids would literally like run through the shop and push each other down and all this to get to the committee they wanted before it was full. So we're like, okay, that can't happen. So the kids actually came up with it. We break it down by grade. So if we have, you know, this number is arbitrary, but if we had 30 freshmen coming to our FFA meeting, we have 3 committees. So we would make a sign up with 10 spots for freshmen. We still do struggle though, if it is a larger committee, that you'll kind of end up with a dud committee some years where all the kids did just go there because their friends were there and they didn't really want to work there. But we do break it down by grade, and that way you have experience too. So you have seniors through freshmen in that committee, and it's not just a freshman committee. We break it apart by grade. Does anybody else have a system?
Well, because we do it by, I don't know if I'm on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We do it by class. So all my upper classes are mixed, 10th through 12th. Our freshman class is the class that probably struggles the most with it when they first start, because this is foreign to them. They're planning something, they get an opinion, they get a say. So what we do is we take kind of the jerky sale, because that's one of the easier ones for them to do, and they can reference a previous report, and they already know about it because they've heard about the jerky sale. It's like one of the big ones that people know about for us. So we'll assign that. We do FFA degrees for that committee, which sounds really crazy, but we want them to, it's a way to get our freshmen to learn about degrees. So we have them come up with ideas of how to promote that. Public speaking events, the FFA creed, this year the committee's like, we want kids to do the creed. And we're like, okay. And the committee actually came and took over my class for a week every Friday, and they had kids. They divide the class up into 5 quads, and they rotated paragraphs, and they had they did pictorials and all these cool things, but the kids came up with that. So we try to take some things that we've done previously, give them an example, and then I make sure I have 2 officer liaisons come in, and really they come in during that period to work with those freshmen to help them through that. And once it takes 1 or 2 times for really them to have that, and all of a sudden they get rolling on it. That's the only group we probably struggle with, is that freshman group. But when we take a class of 20 kids and we say, okay, there's 4 committees in here, that kind of makes it break up. And then every once in a while we get a committee where there is not going to work because of kids goofing off. I might change up kids, or actually the officers will come and say, hey, we're going to change up some kids because this isn't working. And I'm like, go for it. So that's how we kind of do it. And then there's some committees that aren't class-based, and those committees, they go out and ask, and one of the requirements is that you have males and females on your committee, and that they're different age groups. And that has helped greatly in getting kids to know other kids. So we use them for a lot of different purposes, not just for national chapter application.
Does anybody else have any tips for picking committees for Sarah Beth? All right, Diane Miller asked, what paperwork do you have committees complete as far as maintaining a paper trail, and what information to include on that? We have committee binders that each committee will grab before their committee meeting, and then things like apparel order forms, you know, whatever they're working on at that given time, we always know that anything the committee worked on will be in that binder. Now that was kind of pre-Chromebook time, so now we've moved to one-on-one Chromebook. So now we still have a binder because if they've collected money or anything like that physical, they still need someplace to put that. So we still do have a binder. But in addition to that, since we went one-to-one, we also have a shared Google folder for each committee, and we'll add the committee members to that folder. So only they have access to that. And then John and I, of course, and they keep files and things in there. That's really helpful for like next year. So if they're doing the apparel sale, they don't have to create that from scratch. They can just go pull what the group had last year. So we keep a Google folder as well. We've tried to do a Google form committee report that the chairs are supposed to submit at the end of the meeting, just to kind of keep track of what they've done. That has not been super successful. And a lot of that has to do with our time. We have an hour to meet with the committees, but by the time the kids get in there and get broken out, it's more like 45 minutes. So if they do any work during that committee meeting, the chair is trying to run the meeting plus submit that report. It didn't always get done. So we could do a better job of that, and we need to have some way, but we do have a binder in that Google folder in which we keep that in, which is pretty nice. Diana said that the school schedule makes a big difference, and that's 100% true. And I know I'm pretty lucky to have that designated club period. John and I were talking today with our COVID plan for next school year. We're not sure what that resource period is going to look like for us, and that's definitely going to be a game changer if we don't have that for kids to meet. We're going to have to be a little more creative about how we run our meetings and stuff, because we've been so lucky to have that designated school time to do that. And then Lindsay said, are we a Google school? We have Chromebooks, if that's what that means. And we do implement Google Classroom pretty heavily. This year, or at the end of last year though, with COVID, they decided that we're going to use Schoology this year. They feel like that'll be a better transition. So not super excited about Schoology. I really like Google. But so are we a Google school? We have Chromebooks, but we're moving to Schoology for our management system. But I think we'll still have access to all the Google stuff that we'll be able to use. So, all right.
I think the biggest thing is,
go ahead, Tiff.
Is think about it not as an extension, as a separate thing. Think about it as a way to bring a different type of lesson into your classroom. Because at first I was like, how do I do this and not get in trouble with school administration? And then I'm realizing these kids are probably learning more skills and learning how the real world works when we run committees better than any other thing during the school year. And that has really, my administration has come to me and said that. They're like, nowhere else do kids get something like this than when you allow them to take on events that have just, I mean, our events have now just picked up nationally. We just got a call from a national group wanting to know something we just did because they saw it in a newspaper. So let it be part of your driving of your lesson plans for teaching some of that digital citizenship or how to work within your community, or and that's how I really use it. And the officers have started to use it as a way to, it's really life lessons.
And I agree with Tiff. I mean, that would be, if we are all true believers of the 3-circle model, moving all of that into part of our classroom instruction and incorporating that as a seamless piece would definitely be like, you've reached the mecca of implementing all of that by no doubt. All right, so the next thing, I just put those quality standards in there in case my link didn't work. But we assign those quality standards to the events so the committees know which events will be theirs that they'll be working with throughout the year. So our officers, because of the number of officers, we have 7 to 9 depending on the year. So each committee has 2 officers assigned to them, and we call those officer liaisons. And then the committee chairs are elected then from the general membership. They're not officers. So that allows one more additional leadership position in our chapter then. So then the next step that we take, we assign the officers then, they each get a POA event for the marking period. So for example, this is what our list looked like last year. Well, this is actually 18-19, but so the kids have this as a reference. So you can see Austin was doing land judging. He has the quality standard in the committee right there. We try to make it so the committee that they're part of is also the committee handling the event that they have. Depending on how your quality standards break out, though, it's not always a perfect science for us. And sometimes Austin might need to cross over to another committee. He was part of the building committees, our building communities, but if he had an event that fit into another committee, he might go over to check in with them because he's not the chairman of the committee, so it's okay for him to go off and talk to another committee. And that's kind of how we handled that. So we have an event then that they have for each marking period. That would obviously differ though, depending on the number of students, officers you had, or the number of events that you have. We put our officers in charge of each event. Again, it'd be awesome if we could put members in charge. We're just not quite to that point yet, that we can utilize members outside of committees yet. But if we could, that would be great. And that is something we're going to try to move to a little bit this year. And then each year at the officer retreat, we really encourage our officers, and we try to teach them how do you incorporate those committee members to help, because too often officers think they have to do all the work, but really if you're using those committees to the best of their ability, those committee members can do a lot as well. All right, and then this is that one I said I created, but I think this has been a game changer for us actually. So we keep this in the ag classroom. So depending on how you meet when your students come together, we just keep it in the ag room because regardless of what class they're in, they can always grab this and look at this. So we just called it an officer, committee chairperson, and then committee member duty. So if we have specific tasks, so depending on, the officers all have a page, and then the committee chair people always have a page. And then sometimes if committee members have taken a really active role and they're taking leadership positions and have events that they need to complete and do that, they also have a page. So all we write in is, you know, the items. So new member picnic, a description of what needs done, the due date that it needs done by, and then who assigned it. Now, who assigned it? This is really important, and it's important that who assigned it doesn't always have to be a teacher. So it doesn't always have to be John and I giving those assignments. It's great if another officer says, I need you to complete this for me, or if the committee member says, I've appointed this committee member to complete that for me. So if other people are assigning those duties, that's totally fine. And that's why we keep this binder out where everybody can get to it, and they write in those duties. And then the best part for me, it makes it easy that I don't have to try to keep all this straight in my head. Who did I tell to do this, this, and this? Or who is responsible for this, this, and this? Because I can just go to this binder and look at it. The other thing is, if you have good students, and I pulled a really good example here, they'll write you notes about how it was done, where it's located, where it can be found, whatever information that you need for that, they put there. And then I use this system. It depends on how you want to hold students accountable. I use a green, yellow, and red system. If they complete the task and it's done well and on time, I highlight it in green just to say it's crossed off our list and it's done. And then you'll see it's not always a perfect world. If the job didn't get done or it didn't get done on time, I'll highlight it in red. And then if they would come back, so if she'd come back and count these pins and do what she needs to, etc., I'd highlight it in yellow saying it got done, but it was done late. Part of my color coding system, and another reason I know I'm really fortunate, we have all of our officers in an FFA and leadership class most years in which they receive a grade for. So the red, yellow, and red system was an easy way to assign them a grade. Now, that's not always the case, and I have done this where students are not receiving a grade, but they still are accountable because it's written into this binder, which is really nice. And they've been pretty open to it, and they do check it pretty much every day. If it's an active FFA member, they'll come in and grab the binder and take a look at what they need to do. So this is just something simple I came up with. You could definitely make this an online version as well if having a physical binder isn't something that's, you know, conducive to your classroom. So, all right, and then the last thing is putting this all into AET. So some of you said that that's kind of what you're looking for, was how to get it into AT. Some of you have already done that. So one of the first steps is you'll go into your AET and you need to assign the students to work in your program of activities. So this is under tracker, and then it's right here under that C2. So I'm gonna go to my AET. Of course it signed me out. So to get working on the POA from AAT, you go to tracker, and then here at C2, and this allows you to assign the students that you want to have access to that program of activities in AET. And this is our officers who have access to this. All right, so that's the first step. Can you guys see my AET screen right now?
Yes.
Like you see like where it says Heather Ballant, Lily Hansberry for my list of students?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was still stuck on my Google presentation or not. All right, and then the next step, once you assign the students, those are the ones that you want to have access to that. The next step is to enter your dates into your calendar. And this is something you can take that original kind of list of activities that you created, and you can enter the dates into the AET calendar. So to do that, again, you're under the tracker, and then you're here, calendar program of activities. Now, everybody uses this calendar differently. I love my Google Calendar, and I will not venture from my Google Calendar for my reliable calendar that I use. The way we use Google, I have an FFA calendar that all the FFA members can see. I also can see it. My husband can see it. Anybody who needs to know when an FFA event's happening can see that Google Calendar. Unlike AET, it's not a one-stop shop. So we still rely on our Google Calendar as our official chapter calendar, but you do need to enter the stuff into this calendar to get started for those POAs. So I'm gonna go back to, we'll go to October of last year. You'll see you enter all the events on your calendar. This could be done all at once, or it could be done as the events are planned. That's the other important thing to realize about POAs. I think some people think that it's a document that's going to look pretty from the beginning of the school year and it's going to be done. It's not. It's a working document that's always going to be changing, and it's going to be, you know, having additions made to it up until the end of your school year, really. So we run our POA banquet to banquet, because that's how our officers run. People choose to run their POAs differently though. And if you're gonna put this into a national chapter application, you can actually pick those dates that you want your POA to run to. And it doesn't matter what date you pick, anything goes at nationals as far as when you set up that, as long as it's a complete year that fall within that judging category. Diana said, if Google Calendar could be uploaded and merged with AET, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think it can. Carol might know the answer to that. Oh, she's answering. Yeah, see, for me, like I said, my husband has access, and I just need it all in a one-stop shop. So I'm still pretty committed to my Google. The other reason I'm committed to Google and not here, a kid could easily come in here that I gave access to and say fall leadership conferences on a Wednesday, or they could accidentally grab this and move it to Wednesday and flip it over. So I just, for my own calendar, I still like to use Google. But you do need to have the event entered in here. So once you enter the event then, and I'm not gonna enter from a blank screen because that'll take too much time. Once you enter the event then, this is where those POA building tools come up and you can start using that. So, you know, name, location, you guys can see what all you put in here. This one here, it's worth teaching your kids a little bit about activity type because when they go to do their degree applications and things like this, these will automatically go into their fields for their degrees. So it is helpful. These will automatically show up. So try to teach them, like, you know, if it's community service, put it as community service. If it's a competition, put it as a competition. Things like that will help make their degree applications a little neater because these events will kind of transfer into their records. And then you'll see, and this is a completed one for us. We do assign the committee right here, our building communities, and then it's economic development. We don't put anything in this detail section because I think it comes later. You could though, okay? And then you start into these. So this is actually, for anybody who's had a list of events, this is that going to the next step now, actually having the students sit down and come up with goals and things that they want to accomplish with this event. And allowing them to create those goals is really important because it gives them ownership then for the event, and it allows them to take it to the level that they want it to be at then. So, you put the goals in, you put the plan of action. In my opinion, 450 characters doesn't actually give me or give the kids enough room to explain what action items they need to do to complete this goal, but it limits you to 450. What I think is most useful out of this whole thing is this deadlines and dates. This screen here, and this is something you could print for the committee meetings, and the committee members could have this. And if they're like, well, we're not sure what to do next for this event, if this is completed, they can see, oh, where to call Hot Frog Media. And if you can really train your kids to start putting important stuff in there. So instead of having to go look up the phone number for Hot Frog Media, this committee is just going to be able to see, here's the phone number already, because the group already has that entered. So this can be very helpful. And in my opinion, to make the students, to transition where students are starting to complete these planning activities, having them complete this part is the most important. This does not go into your national chapter application. So sometimes I think people forget this dates and deadlines portion of this, but definitely in my opinion, I think it is the most important part of that. And the other thing, I do see that Carol brought up that you can copy it. So I will go and we'll put in a new event here. So our officer retreat is going to be.
By the way, they have those sheets under AET, I think under the teacher lessons that can be printed.
Correct. So if you would like to do a hard copy and then somebody type them in later, they are available there as well. And that's another thing. Maybe you don't want to give your general membership access to the AET portion, but you still want them to do it. Giving them hard copy sheets would allow them to do that without giving them access. And then somebody else would just type it in, maybe your officer liaison or committee member or committee chair or whoever. Okay, so when you enter a date, and like things like those phone numbers and things like that, because you want the next group next year to be able to see this, this copy feature is really nice. So add an event. So, oh, wait, no, I led you astray a little bit. You actually have to go to last year's event. And in all honesty, this does show that my kids do most of the work. When it comes to this POA part, they really are the ones entering it. And sometimes I have to ask them about how to do that. So to copy the event from last year, so I'm just going to go back to that Barnyard Bonanza. I guess I could have done it from the screen I was in. I can just go to copy this activity. And if I know what the date's going to be next year, I put that in and it's going to be in there. Double-edged sword though. Depending on how you're checking up on the kids, they could do copy this activity. And if you went in without really reading it, it would look like they did it. But if you look, they might not have done any planning. So if, you know, the contact person changed or something like that, it really does copy everything from last year over. So I'm a little hesitant because sometimes I don't like kids to do just what they did last year. Sometimes I like them to think of that didn't work great last year, so what can we do differently this year? But it is an option in there, and depending on the kid, it's okay when they copy them. Sometimes it's not though. So it all depends on the student and how that works. But in my opinion, that deadlines and dates, I think that's the most important part that they can do. And then the other important part, especially if you're going to share this and copy this from year to year, make sure they go in and do your results and evaluation section, because that's to tell the group, okay, this went well this year. This is how we would change it this year, things like that. And that part's really important as well. I don't use this, but I think we could get in the habit of it in the future. There's a place the student in charge of that event could go in and select who participated. So it'll give you your whole list of students here, and you can select who attended that. And I assume that'll transfer then directly into their AET accounts, and that'll help them on their record keeping end. They won't actually have to enter the event if that chairperson says that they were there or whatever. I'm assuming too, you can print a report where people who like keep score of events, you can do participation value here. It would be an easy way to track if you have a system that you track what events students follow. You could use this as well. So this is really, those of you that just had a list of activities, this is that next step, is having the students go in and create those goals and plans, creating those dates and deadlines. And then going in at the end is just as important in saying how the event went, providing pictures of the event and things like that. So is there any questions about the AET side? Diana says, who does the evaluation, advisors or students? We have our students do that. And I try to take time to look over their events and provide feedback. Unfortunately, for me, that does happen more often for the kids I'm grading their POAs than the ones that don't get graded. But the students are the ones typing the results in the evaluation in. Oh, yeah, budget feature. That one's really important too. We do use the budget feature. It's a great way for students to start to break down their money and understand how it's going to get used for that particular event. So yes, we do use the budget. And it's important that they go back in and put how much the actual expense was. So you'll see they thought it was going to be $120 for the tickets, but it was actually $132. So for next year's planning, having the actual budget numbers in there would be really important. So yeah, we do use that. So is there any other questions about the AET side of things?
Hey, there's an OWL chat today at 3 o'clock on effective POAs and agriscience in your national chapters. It's being offered by National FFA, and I happened to do an OWL chat yesterday, and they were really good. So I just want to kind of let that know. I have to go to an FAE visit, but thank you. It's awesome.
See you, Tiff. And then the last thing is the national chapter application. We find it's a motivator for our students to complete an effective POA because the information that they enter into the POA goes into your national chapter application. So that picture I have there, that was a couple years back. We were getting 2-star national chapter applications and we finally hit the 3-star mark. So that's them holding our tiny little 3-star charm there. But I think the national chapter is a good motivator for the students. However, if you're just starting POA, maybe you want to make that your year 2 goal and focus on getting the information in AET and stuff for the first year and then moving to that national chapter. But if you've already been entering this stuff, maybe this is a next step that you need to provide the motivation to the students for that. So for the national chapter, what it does, your national chapter highlights 9 of your events. So even if you have 30, it'll take 9 and highlight those. You get to pick the 9 that you want to share that your chapter did in that, and you'll put those into that application. So to find that national chapter, it's under program reports in AET and then FFA and awards, and you generate a new application. I'm not going to say a whole lot about national chapter, but I do want to show you one thing because if you've never done one, it can be a little bit confusing. When you do a new application, and this is my application from this year, but I did run one yesterday just to show you guys this. When you first open this up, you can only see Form 1, okay? Form 1 is the simple part of a national chapter application. This could be done from the very beginning of the school year. Once you create that list, you could go ahead and do Form 1. So what Form 1 is, this is how National FFA knows that you have one event in each of the quality standards. So you list the event here that you have. I must have my dates funky for this. It allows you to pick them from AET. So if you have them in AET, you're able to just pick them and import them right in. Then you have to do this indicator. You have to, there's a certain score you have to earn on this rubric for it to unlock the rest of the application then. So that's the other piece of that. There is a minimum score that's found in the chapter handbook, National Chapter Handbook. You can find that. And then once you've done that, this will say met, and then it goes ahead and opens up that Form 2 then of that application, which looks like this. So once Form 2 opens, once you have Form 1 done, that'll still all be there. So you can see here's my choose from AET option because there's it's in there. But your actual application then looks like this. Again, you can pull these activities right from the POA that you've already created. So if the kids have been doing a good job keeping up with the POA, it really goes right into this application. So I see that Carol said there, it's great recognition and PR for your program. And it is, because, you know, you can say we had a 3-star at the national level and only, you know, 3 or 4 other states in Pennsylvania had that, or whatever. It is great publicity to show that your chapter is doing really great activities as part of your POA. So I'd encourage you, make this a goal at some point, maybe not this year if you're just starting fresh, especially this year is going to be really weird because of Corona. John and I were looking at our list and saying, well, that was canceled, this was canceled, this was canceled. But on the flip side, it's also a great time to teach students how to plan, because you're going to be planning a lot of probably chapter events versus the state and the bigger events. So that is something I find, if, you know, ACES is one of our events. The kids don't really plan a whole lot of that because that's put on by the state. So when it comes to POA planning, they don't have a ton, where our new member picnic, that's all them, and they have to do that planning piece. So maybe this is the year to start using these POA tools, because you're going to be planning so many local events and not as many state events that are already planned for you. So that's really all I have. If you guys have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. I by no means and think that, you know, I don't have room for improvement here. And the more I looked into this, I'm like, I'm going to try this year. And I have lots of new ideas I'm going to try as well. But hopefully you found something that was useful to you and you can take home to your chapter.
Yes, I second that. Excellent job, Ayla. Tons and tons of great information, tips, and advice shared. We've got a couple minutes of scheduled time remaining. If anybody has any questions, feel free to type them or unmute and you can ask verbally. Yes, Sarah Beth, I would be very excited to dig into planning this year's POA as well after that. Okay, well, if anybody has questions, again, feel free to pose them now. I'd like to take this opportunity to plug a couple other events coming up, some in the very near future. Some of you may already be registered to join us again tomorrow